Welcome to the Octopod. I'm Kyle Davis, head of the Office of the CTO. Join us as we dive into the latest technologies and trends shaping business. Whether you're a tech enthusiast, a business leader, or just looking to stay ahead in the digital age, this podcast is for you. Let's unlock opportunities with technology together. Let's jump in.
Welcome to the Octopod. Today it's me, Tim Russell, your host, and I'm here with Matt Hains from Intel. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Tim.
So AI PCs, they're no longer a science project. This episode, we want to look at what's changed and what's changing in 2026, what customers should standardize on, and where the measurable value showing up beyond I've got Copilot. So at the end of this episode, when Matt and I have finished prattling on, we should be able to help you understand, what's new in 2026, particularly around the commercial AI PC waves, and in simple English that you can explain it to someone else. You should be able to prioritize 2 or 3 AI PC use cases that move from experimentation to adoption, and should also be able to make a decision on what belongs on device and what belongs cloud in your AI plan, and why that matters commercially to you. So look, let's dive straight back in, Matt. Look, what's genuinely new in 2026 for business AI PCs, and why should customers care about that now?
Well, thanks, Tim. It's great to be here. I think that the biggest thing that's changed over the past couple of years on AI PCs is the maturity of the software. So when we first launched AI PCs a couple of years ago, there was a pretty limited set of use cases, and a lot of them weren't really hugely business specific, right? You could create an image of yourself on the moon, which was nice, but perhaps not that useful every day in business. And what we've seen over the last couple of years is really all of the software vendors for the PC have really been leaning in and taking advantage of the new technology to add value, right? To either make existing things better or to enable you to do new things. We now have more than 500 AI experiences across popular software that businesses use every day. And in addition to broadly available software, what we're starting to see is more and more kind of vertically specific solutions. So, to give you a couple of examples, if you're in the defense industry, there's now AI models, AI solutions that you can use for battlefield logistics. That's a really specific example, right? So it's not just a general, I can blow my background in Teams, which is useful for everybody, but it's actually specific to my industry. The other thing that's changed, I would say, is it's become easier and easier to build your own AI solutions based on your data, based on your workflows, your personas. And so there's solutions. We have a free solution from Intel AI Assistant Builder. If you go to aibuilder.intel.com, you can download that. Basically, that gives you a curated list of models, and you can very quickly start building solutions for your business. So I think software maturity is one of the really big things, right, that's making this value real. If I talk about the hardware for a minute, we're actually, with the products that we're releasing this year, all of them are AI PC processors, essentially. So they have advanced GPUs and NPUs built into the chip to accelerate AI workflows. And that's all the way down to kind of the mainstream space. So again, last year or the year before, it was very much sort of more in the premium end of the products. Now kind of everyday workers can benefit from these capabilities because we're going top to bottom with the solution. However, of course, we don't stop innovating. So it's great that maybe stuff that the top end of the devices had last year, we now get on old devices this year, but we're continuing to innovate. With our Intel Core Ultra Series 3, at the top end of the stack, we now have processors with, if you like, TOPS as a measurement, actually 180 TOPS across the platform, and in particular, very advanced integrated GPU with 120 TOPS. And what that enables you to do is really new things that you couldn't do before on a thin and light notebook. Yeah. So for example, 3D design, advanced video editing. If people are familiar with DaVinci Resolve Studio, you're probably thinking about a workstation with a discrete graphics card, thick, chunky. Well, now you can do that on the integrated chip, right, on a thin and light, a high-end workstation, high-end notebook, etc. So I think the hardware's advanced, but the most important thing is that software maturity and the range of use cases.
And I think that there's been a lot of talk about ISVs working on stuff, and people have been waiting for the silver bullet of AI. Well, my personal opinion, and we're here in Shaw Studio, and one of the terms they brought to me earlier this year was ambient AI, is we're not buying AI for the sake of AI. We're buying it because an application does something, and under the scenes, it's using the AI chip, it's using the NPU. And I think that's kind of a mindset shift is you don't buy AI, but if you're not AI enabled, you're going to find you're left behind the curve in the application capability. There's two other things I want to touch on. One of those is about that progression of food chain for devices. And we've seen this. A lot of organizations historically where CDW does business does, I don't know, a 3-year recycle on their hardware. And so they refresh all the devices every 3 years. Now we've stood up capabilities that start saying, well, yeah, the top of the food chain may get the highest end of devices, but now we've got a process to recover, repair, return to the next level of the user, while eventually that AI PC will propagate through an entire organization. I don't expect a lot of organizations to go and change their entire base to go to AI PCs. But if they don't start on that journey at somewhere in their organization, they're going to find themselves behind the curve because the applications, keep me honest on this, they're not going to reach their full potential. They're not going to deliver what end users need. And that's the both in-cloud and on-PC compute capability that differentiates them in their daily lives.
I think if I can add, when you're looking at the user experience, people with legacy PCs without that AI capability, some of the features might still run, but your CPU is going to be fresh, your battery is going to be drained, the experience is going to be really poor. And then by moving them to a more advanced AI PC, then all of those tasks get offloaded to the GPU or the NPU, and the experience is much better, the battery life is better. So I think there's also big gains for user experience in adopting this technology.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about right workload on the right processor core.
Exactly.
You're not trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. So let's move on from that one. A lot of organizations have Copilot, or they have Teams Premium, or they have some kind of capability, but they're struggling to find real tangible value. So what would you say is the secret to demonstrating or proving AI value, particularly within the end user compute space?
Sure. So I think one of the things you can do is actually measure that user experience benefit. We worked with one of our global SIs, and they measured the digital experience score using something like a NextThink across all of their employees. And they found that there were significant improvements on our latest kind of Intel Core Ultra Series 2, which were last year's products. They found the user experience was about 28% higher. So versus a legacy machine. Because of what I said, right, applications are running more efficiently, the device is less taxed, and the overall experience is much, much better. So that's one way of proving value, I would say. If I give a few more examples, I think you can pick workflows that maybe has, if it's somehow repetitive, or if there's a lot of information you need to try and consolidate. So, to give you an example, we worked with a large bank, and really they were able to generate reports that were kind of fairly standard in minutes rather than somebody spending, half an hour, 40 minutes kind of creating them. Or if you're in a multinational company and you need to translate documents, AI does that very, very quickly, very effectively. And so by, picking specific workflows and then measuring the improvement, this bank was able to accelerate certain workflows up to 40% as an example. So, and I think that gets then to proven value, right? If you can find a set of tasks that you can then obviously monitor. I think the other thing that's kind of really valuable is with these AI PCs, you do get a massive boost in battery life, as I said, because you're using the right engine for the right task, and it's much more efficient. And we now do have true all-day battery life with the Intel Core Ultra Series 2 and 3. And we worked with a manufacturing company who said that was an absolute game changer for their employees. Rather than being sort of chained to their desks or to power outlets, they could collaborate more, they could change workflows because they had this confidence in their devices.
And it's interesting, it plays into, for me, one of the key messages we take from CDW is the modern workspace should be an equitable experience. It doesn't matter where you are or who you are, you should be able to do the same job. And that being untethered from the power supply, being able to work just as well with local compute on a train as I can in the office connected to the network is absolutely critical in this day and age. And that ties very much into the digital employee experiences. We did a similar internal study. We work with a number of NextThink, ControlUp, Tanium, all of those parties, WXP from HP. We work with all of those. And you can see very real, tangible, even if it's a second difference. If you've got a workforce of thousands of people, every second becomes minutes, becomes hours, becomes weeks of lost or gained productivity time when you have a platform that doesn't feel like it's competing against you. And I always use this as an example when I'm talking about digital employee experiences. I can talk to a room full of people and say, how many of you have ever heard someone say, I'm going to throw this laptop out of a window? 99% of the people in the room will say, I've heard someone say that. It's not acceptable. We should not accept it. And we should be building a basis around endpoint experience that's built on the AI capability, where you can give this capability into the end user to say, you can fix your own problems. You know what? You don't even have to fix your own problems. AI compute modeling, these digital employee experience tools, they can now start helping you fix the problems yourself. And what we're seeing is a transition to this, I'm more in control of my destiny. My colleague Yarrow, he talks about zero ticket architecture. And this all starts spawning out of putting that compute and that capability into the hands of the end user. And I think 2026 is AI is going to be less of a sold message, it's more of an outcome message. If you have this capability, you can now utilize these applications to make that difference in how people do their job. So thank you for answering the questions on that one. But I think it's going to lead on to the untethered approach. Is we also have to look at on-device versus cloud AI. Mm-hmm. Now, when we consume cloud resources, there has to be a cloud, a data center, there's a compute cost, sometimes there's egress costs, and there's things like that. What's the decision framework that a customer could use to help understand the funding critical decisions between on-device or in the cloud?
So I think it's a really interesting topic, actually, and certainly something that's evolving, over the last few years and next few years. Ultimately, at Intel, we believe that there will be a hybrid model, with some workloads running on device, some in the cloud, and actually working together, right? So certain parts of a workflow on device communicating with AI in the cloud. But I think if I start off with a lot of the reasons people want to do AI on device, so I think let's start with privacy, security, in some case regulatory, right? If you're sending personal information, customers' information, confidential information to the cloud, in some cases, regulations don't allow you to, but certainly you don't want to, right, necessarily. And so by running the AI on the device, the data never leaves your device, right? So it's private, secure, and it complies with, all the regulations that you need to, depending on your industry. Another big reason is cost. So whenever you're running a workload in the cloud, there's normally a cost per token or a cost per outcome, whatever it is. By running it on the device, it's essentially free. You've already paid for the hardware. Maybe I'll share an example with you, which I think really highlights this. One of the areas, of course, another area we see kind of solutions is in the marketing space. And there is an application called Cyberlink Promeo. And what this does, amongst other things, is it enables you to reformat your content depending on the platform you're trying to advertise on. So if it's Instagram, it'll put the images in a certain ratio, it will put the text in a certain number of characters, etc. And then Etsy is different, and Amazon. So basically, the AI helps you do that really, really quickly. And when you go into the application, you want to use it, there's basically two buttons. One button says, do this in the cloud free for 3 times, and then you need to pay per usage. And then the other button says, unlimited AI on the PC forever.
Which is insane.
So as I say, if there's something you're doing regularly, you can do it for free forever on the PC, or a couple of times, and then you have to pay every time you're doing it, because there are real costs, right, in this cloud infrastructure.
Really? That's an interesting business model, actually. Is it? We provide the intelligence, you've bought the application, but you can run it on your PC for free, or we'll give you cloud compute capability if you don't have it, but you pay for that pleasure. That's an interesting model.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of the software vendors and businesses, when they're looking at, well, where do I want to run this workload? If you can run it on the client, of course, not everything. Some workloads are too complex, at least today. Obviously, we keep innovating, we keep expanding, as I was saying earlier. But if you can run it on the device, then obviously that's much more affordable. And then I think the other one, which you kind of hinted at earlier, is that kind of consistent experience when you're not connected to the internet. So I talked about that we worked with an energy company that had information in thousands of documents, and it was very difficult for their engineers to get it. They implemented a small language model of device that sped that workflow up by about 4x in finding that information, and it needed to run offline because they weren't always connected. Or as you say, even if it's as a knowledge worker, if you're on the train, on the plane, you don't have connection, you want to have that consistent experience. You don't want suddenly to not be able to do things, or for things to run really badly. So so I think that, there's lots of reasons. Security, cost, and then working offline would be the top 3. So as I mentioned at the start, we believe the future's hybrid. And so let me give you an example of AI that runs on the device and in the cloud to deliver an outcome. One of the areas that we see a lot of benefit in AI PCs is security. Because we can offload workloads to the GPU and the NPU, that means we can do more aggressive security scanning. And we can also use the AI capabilities of those parts of the chip to run deep learning models to detect different types of threats, spot the signatures of certain types of attacks using AI. And so that's one area, right? We're working with a lot of partners, CrowdStrike are one of them, Microsoft Defender, etc., on how do we use that on-device AI to detect more threats. But there's also examples in the security space where we use both the cloud and the device. So one of the things we're working with CrowdStrike on is how can we use AI on the device to more intelligently filter the data that gets sent to the cloud. So, obviously, ideally, you'd send all the data in the memory to the cloud constantly, and then all these huge AI compute would analyze that and spot attacks. But that's not practical, of course. Yeah. And so AI in the device can intelligently filter the data, send it to the cloud. The cloud can then run even more advanced models to detect more threats. And so that's one example where a workflow is AI on device and AI in the cloud.
Interesting. So it's almost like qualification and then split the offload that I can to the cloud and keep what needs to be local.
Yeah,
it's interesting. I think hybrid is the way forward. As you were saying, the battle capability, for example, or as I call it, shopping on a Saturday morning. You may not want to leave your device. You want to protect that, and I understand that. But you have to have that compute capability. Now, look, we've covered the questions I wanted to do on today's podcast, and I think if we wrap up, hybrid AI is absolutely the way forward, but hybrid AI requires both end user and cloud-based compute. You can't do hybrid without end user AI compute. Every chipset going forward from Intel now includes the neural processing unit. It's not that you can't not buy AI. Your refresh cycle will at some point now take AI into the end user compute. Applications are being developed to make use of that, and we're seeing real tangible benefits in end user experience and end user productivity as a direct result of having that AI compute capability. Matt, I'd like to say thank you very much for joining me here on the couch today and doing this podcast. I hope for everyone who is listening, they've got some value out of that, and we delivered on the 3 things we said we were going to do. There are opportunities if you want assessments, you want further understanding, please do reach out to CDW or your contacts here, and we can look at running assessments to help you understand how to get on your AI journey. With that, Matt, once again, I'd like to thank you.
Brilliant. No, thanks, Tim. I appreciate you having me here.
Until next time on the Octopod.
Into today's episode, be sure to check out the back catalogue for more great insights. Don't forget to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. We appreciate your support, and if you have a topic you want us to cover, feel free to reach out. Catch you next time.